All right, so today we're going to dive deep into the Dune universe.
Oh, yeah.
And you know how sometimes there's a character you think you've got all figured out,
Mm-hmm.
but then you realize there's way more to him than meets the eye?
Oh, for sure.
That's Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen for yeah.
Definitely.
You guys sent in a ton of material about him.
A lot of character studies.
Yeah, it's like someone was getting ready for like a full-on Dune debate,
Right?
and wow, he's complex.
Absolutely.
So we're going to unpack what makes him so fascinating.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so to start,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about House Harkonnen.
Okay.
I mean, they have a reputation, right,
Oh, yeah.
for being cruel and manipulative. Like
Definitely.
practically their trademark.
It's in their blood.
So can you imagine what it must have been like growing up in
Yeah.
that environment?
Just imagine being raised in a family where ruthlessness is not just accepted, but expected.
Right.
The sources really paint a picture of House Harkonnen as like a breeding ground for ambition and paranoia, where power is everything and betrayal is always lurking around the corner.
Always got to watch your back.
For Feyd-Rautha, this upbringing instilled in him a deep need to prove himself,
Oh, I bet.
to constantly fight for dominance even within his own family.
Yeah, and speaking of family,
Yeah,
the material you sent actually mentions that Baron Harkonnen,
Feyd-Rautha's uncle.
right, his uncle saw him as the ideal heir.
Makes sense.
Someone who could secure their grip on Arrakis and all that precious spice.
Oh, of course.
Talk about pressure.
Absolutely.
So much is riding on him.
And it really shows the Baron's cunning.
Yeah, how so?
Well, he chose Feyd-Rautha specifically because he has not only the strength,
Right.
but also the intelligence and charisma to maintain their power.
It's a powerful combination.
But even with that privileged position, Feyd-Rautha still had to fight.
Really.
Oh yeah, there's this constant sense that he's trying to prove himself.
Prove himself to who?
To everyone.
Like he doesn't think he's good enough.
It seems like he's always trying to live up to the Baron's expectations and secure his place in this family,
It's a cutthroat family.
to say the least.
That's so interesting because the sources describe him as being incredibly intelligent and charismatic.
He's a complicated guy.
Yeah, he's clearly not just a muscle-bound brute.
Definitely not.
So how does that intelligence play into his character?
Well, it creates this interesting internal conflict.
Oh, how so?
He's capable of strategic thinking.
Right.
He can play the long game. But those skills are often overshadowed by his impulsiveness
I see.
and his desire for immediate gratification.
So he's impatient.
A little bit.
Makes sense.
It's like he's caught between two worlds.
What do you mean?
On one hand, he's a calculating manipulator.
In all the
He's this volatile heir apparent.
a dangerous combination.
Oh, sure.
And there's also this idea that comes up a lot in the sources,
What's that?
that Feyd-Rautha is kind of like a dark mirror to Paul Atreides.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Like, they both have these incredible gifts,
Uh-huh.
but their moral compasses are pointing in completely different directions.
That's a great observation. They do share many of the same qualities, like leadership, potential, strategic thinking,
Okay.
physical prowess,
I feel it.
but their motivations and ultimately their choices are completely different.
So how do their choices differ?
Well, Paul, despite his own inner darkness,
Right.
ultimately strives for balance and justice.
Okay.
But Feyd-Rautha embraces power as a means to dominate and control.
He wants to rule.
Exactly.
Their approaches to power are pretty striking.
In what way?
Well, for example,
Hmm.
the sources point out that Paul, even with his enhanced abilities,
Mm-hmm.
he hesitates to use violence unless it's absolutely necessary.
He doesn't take it lightly.
It's like he really feels the weight of his actions.
Yeah, but Feyd-Rautha, on the other hand,
Yeah.
he seems to revel in violence.
Like he enjoys it.
He uses it as a tool to instill fear and assert his dominance.
So different from Paul.
Very different approaches.
And this difference becomes even more apparent when you consider the Dune prophecy.
How so?
Well, both Paul and Feyd-Rautha are products of the Bene Gesserit breeding program,
Right.
which was designed to create a powerful individual who could change the course of history.
Why?
But Paul embraces this destiny.
Even though he's hesitant.
Yeah, but Feyd-Rautha seems to embody like a twisted version of that potential.
It's like the prophecy could have gone either way,
Yeah, with Paul representing the light.
and Feyd-Rautha representing the darkness.
It's that duality that's at the heart of their rivalry.
Absolutely. It's not just a personal conflict.
It's bigger than that.
It's a clash of ideologies, a battle for the soul of Arrakis.
That's intense.
And it makes you wonder,
About what?
could Feyd-Rautha have chosen a different path?
Right. Was he destined to be the villain?
That's the question.
And the sources make you think about how his
The
upbringing,
Harkonnen culture.
yeah, all that cruelty and manipulation,
How it might have played a role in turning him into the antagonist.
I mean, it had to have had an impact on him.
It's clear that his environment had a profound impact.
Yeah, but there are also hints in the sources.
Even the ones that focus on his bad deeds.
Oh, really?
That suggest something more complex beneath the surface.
So maybe he wasn't born evil?
Maybe he was molded by his circumstances.
Makes you think about nature versus nurture.
Yeah, in a whole new way.
And that's where things get really interesting.
How so?
The sources don't just present him as a one-dimensional bad guy.
Right.
They offer glimpses of his internal struggles,
Yeah.
his moments of self-doubt,
Interesting.
even a fleeting sense of compassion.
Really?
It's like maybe, just maybe, there was a possibility for something different.
A different path.
Exactly.
So how do we reconcile these contradictory sides of him?
Yeah, the ruthless Harkonnen heir.
And these glimpses of something more?
It's a puzzle.
We need to dig deeper into the events and relationships that shaped him.
Okay, so where should we start?
Well, his connection to Lady Jessica adds another layer of complexity.
Oh, Lady Jessica Paul Atreides' mother.
That's right, and a key member of the Bene Gesserit.
The sisterhood with all the plans.
Exactly the ones pulling the strings.
So how does she fit into Feyd-Rautha's story?
Well, she's a pivotal figure, and the sources hint at a pretty intriguing connection between them.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Remember, the Bene Gesserit had a big plan, the breeding program, to create the Kwisatz Haderach.
Right, and Paul Atreides was supposed to be the result.
He was, but the Bene Gesserit, they always think long-term.
Oh yeah, they're always 10 steps ahead.
Always have backup plans.
Endgame.
And what's fascinating is that the sources suggest they considered Feyd-Rautha
For what?
as a potential breeding partner for Lady Jessica.
Wait, they wanted Lady Jessica to have a child with Feyd-Rautha?
It's a wild thought, isn't it?
But she already had Paul, and he was supposed to be their chosen one.
Right. But they were hedging their bets.
Why would they even consider Feyd-Rautha?
Because of his genetic potential.
What do you mean?
Remember, the Bene Gesserit seek balance? They want to understand all facets of human potential, even the darker aspects.
I guess that makes sense.
Feyd-Rautha represented raw power,
He was a wild card,
a potent genetic wild card.
and they were drawn to that,
They saw the potential for something truly extraordinary.
even if it was dangerous.
Even if it meant embracing the darkness.
It adds a whole new dimension to his character.
Hasn't it?
Knowing that the Bene Gesserit, with their emphasis on control and manipulation, saw him as a potential key to their breeding program.
It's almost like cosmic irony.
It really is, and it makes you think about how Lady Jessica might have perceived him.
Did she see him as a threat, or did she see something else?
Something beyond the Harkonnen brutality.
That's the mystery.
The sources don't tell us what she thought.
But it's clear that the Bene Gesserit's interest in Feyd-Rautha created a strange dynamic between them.
Yeah, even though she ultimately chose Duke Leto and Father Paul.
That potential for a different path hangs in the air.
What if she had chosen differently?
It's a tantalizing thought.
It almost adds a layer of tragedy to Feyd-Rautha's story.
How so?
He's striving for power and recognition.
Mm-hmm.
But all the while, the Bene Gesserit are considering him as a pawn in their game.
It's a tough position to be in.
Do you think he knew about their intentions?
That's a great question.
The sources don't say for sure.
But given his intelligence and his thirst for knowledge...
It's hard to imagine he wouldn't have suspected something.
Right. He wasn't stupid.
Imagine the internal conflict.
On one hand, he's the Harkonnen heir.
And on the other, he's a pawn in a scheme he doesn't fully understand.
It would mess with your sense of self.
And it makes his rivalry with Paul even more complex.
How so?
Were they just fighting for control of Arrakis?
Or was there something more?
Like a deeper competition.
Maybe they both felt like they were vying for a destiny that was predetermined.
It's like they were both playing roles into play.
But neither of them knew the whole script.
Exactly. And it shows how powerful the Bene Gesserit were.
They were master manipulators.
Their plans affected generations.
Rippling through time.
Okay, so we've got the Harkonnen upbringing,
Right?
the complex relationship with Lady Jessica and the Bene Gesserit.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another aspect of Feyd-Rautha's character that really stands out in the sources.
What is it?
His obsession with the gladiatorial arena.
Yes, the arena.
It's more than just a hobby for him, right?
It's an outlet for him.
In what way?
It's a place where he can enact his desires for power control and dominance.
He's described as a master swordsman,
Oh, yeah, he was incredibly skilled.
a skilled fighter who loves the thrill of combat.
But it's not just about brute force.
There's more to it,
He's cunning and manipulative, even in the arena.
like a chess player,
Exactly. He's always thinking a few steps ahead.
setting traps for his opponents.
Always trying to outmaneuver them.
It's about more than just winning for him.
He wants to control the narrative.
He wants to be seen as invincible.
A force of nature.
The arena is his stage
It's where he builds his reputation.
and instills fear in his enemies.
It's all part of his game.
It's like he's using the arena as a proving ground,
Not just for his physical ability.
but for his mind, too.
He wants to prove he's the smartest, the strongest, the best.
It all ties back to that need for validation we talked about,
He's looking for approval, not just from his family.
but from everyone.
He wants the cheers of the crowd.
The adoration,
It fuels his ego.
but ultimately, his reliance on the arena becomes his downfall.
That final confrontation with Paul.
It all goes down in the arena.
And we know how it ends.
It doesn't end well for him.
It's a tragic irony.
How so?
The very thing he used to build his reputation becomes the setting for his demise.
It's almost like he gets so caught up in playing the role of the gladiator
The undefeated champion.
that he loses sight of the bigger picture
He underestimates Paul.
and fails to see what's coming.
It speaks to a deeper tension within him,
What do you mean?
a struggle between control and chaos.
He wants to control everything.
But in the end, he can't control the forces that are in motion around him.
So his obsession with the arena,
It's not just a character quirk
it's a reflection of who he is.
of his desires and his insecurities.
And ultimately it leads to his fate.
Which brings us to the most intriguing question of all.
What's that?
Was Feyd-Rautha inherently evil?
Or was there a chance for something different?
It's hard to say.
The sources don't shy away from his cruelty,
No, they don't.
his willingness to manipulate and harm others,
It's all there.
but they also offer these glimpses of moments where he hesitates,
Really?
where he shows a flicker of something that could be remorse or regret.
That's fascinating.
Even within all the bad stuff,
Mm-hmm.
there are hints of a more complex inner life.
It makes you wonder.
If under different circumstances, he could have made different choices.
Maybe he could have.
So was he a product of his environment?
Did the Harkonnen culture inevitably shape him into the villain?
It's a tough question.
It's like a nature versus nurture debate on a cosmic scale.
How much of his villainy was predetermined?
And how much was his own free will?
That's the brilliance of Frank Herbert.
He doesn't give us easy answers.
He makes us think.
He presents us with a character who is both repellent and strangely compelling.
We can't look away.
And it forces us to confront the complexities of human nature.
So we've talked about Feyd-Rautha's Harkonnen upbringing,
His relationship with Lady Jessica.
his obsession with the arena.
And those glimpses of a more nuanced side to him.
It makes his story all the more tragic.
But there's one more thing I want to explore.
What's that?
The possibility of a different path for him,
The sources hint at this what-ifs scenario.
where he chooses a different course.
Maybe even embraces the Bene Gesserit way.
What do you think that would have looked like?
It's an interesting thought, a Feyd-Rautha raised outside the Harkonnen world.
Imagine him trained by the Bene Gesserit.
What kind of man would he have become?
It's a fascinating question.
It opens up a whole world of possibilities.
He might have used his intelligence and cunning for good.
Instead of manipulation and domination,
He could have been a diplomat.
a peacemaker.
Someone who brings people together.
Instead of tearing them apart,
It's a stark contrast to the Feyd-Rautha we know,
the ruthless Harkonnen heir.
who dies violently in the arena,
But it shows the potential that was there,
the path not taken.
and it underscores the importance of upbringing and environment.
Had he been exposed to different values,
Different role models
maybe those glimpses of compassion we see,
could have been nurtured.
and allowed to flourish.
But let's be real.
What do you mean?
A benevolent Feyd-Rautha would make for a very different Dune story.
That's true.
The conflict between him and Paul
Their clash of ideologies.
is so central to the story.
It drives the narrative.
But even within that conflict,
There are hints of respect,
really,
almost admiration between them,
they're both products of the Bene Gesserit breeding program.
with incredible potential.
But their paths diverge so dramatically.
It's a testament to the power of choice.
I wonder if Feyd-Rautha ever felt envy towards Paul.
Seeing him embrace a destiny that he might have had.
It's possible he craved validation.
Recognition.
He wanted to be seen as the most powerful,
The most cunning.
the most worthy.
And in Paul, he saw a reflection of himself.
A twisted
A
reflection.
version of himself that could have been.
But the choices they made led them down different paths,
It's like looking in a warped mirror.
seeing a version of yourself that might have been.
But the path not taken.
And that makes their final confrontation in the arena even more meaningful.
It's not just a fight.
It's a clash of destinies.
A culmination of all their choices.
Even in defeat,
Feyd-Rautha makes Paul face the darkness.
the temptations of power,
It's a reminder that even heroes can be tempted.
by ruthlessness.
The desire to win at all costs.
Feyd-Rautha is a cautionary tale.
He shows us what happens when power goes unchecked.
When it's not balanced by morality and compassion,
It can corrupt anyone.
even the most promising individual.
It makes us think about our own choices
The paths we take.
and how they affect the world around us.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We've
explored Feyd-Rautha's Harkonnen upbringing,
his relationships,
his obsession with the arena.
and the possibility of a different path.
It's been a fascinating deep dive,
It has.
even though he's a villain,
He makes us ask big questions.
about good and evil,
Ambitious.
and the choices we make in the face of challenges.
He reminds us that even in a sci-fi epic like Dune,
It's the personal stories that matter.
the struggles of individuals,
Feyd-Rautha's story
for all its darkness and tragedy.
stays with us long after we finish the book.
It does.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Feyd-Rautha, what's the key takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Don't underestimate the power of choice.
Even in a universe like Dune,
Even in a world of destiny and prophecy,
our choices shape who we are.
Feyd-Rautha's story proves that.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It is my pleasure.
We hope you've gained a new perspective on Feyd-Rautha.
And on Dune itself.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.